Dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. M15, Professor retired from the Department of Library and Information Science, Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar. The topic for discussion here is the choice of a classification scheme for a library. For most of the time, for most of us, the choice may not be necessary if we are working in an old library, because in the old libraries, even a new librarian has to continue with the old system for various reasons. In a new library, someone have the privilege and the good opportunity to consider to use a new classification system. In such cases, what we should do it, how to choose one, that there are some factors which we must take into consideration. A sort of classification is always essential for a library in the real sense. Without it, a library is simply a dump of books which will not be availed to their full use. The question is which classification to use. Many standard and general classification systems are easily available and being used in different libraries. We have to choose from many. Choice of a system is more important, as once a classification is chosen, it is not easy to replace or change it for many reasons. You buy a car or even a house. If you are not satisfied with it, you can change it. But it's not so with the classification system once adopted in a library. Hence, librarians have to be very careful, judicious, and even visionary in its choice in a newly formed library. There are various factors which can guide us in the choice of a system. First of all, we should be very clear about our needs, not only of today, but of the next 50 years. Subject specialization of the library, level of the users, and the availability of expert staff must be considered beforehand. And then we should know the technical qualities of the classification itself. We should know how much detailed it is and how much it is. We have to decide whether we have to buy full edition or an abridged one. Now, the new question is whether we should use the print edition or the online one. Latter has many value-added features. We have to know whether the classification chosen will be useful to all the subjects of the library or whether it will need extension and modification for some subjects, local subjects such as Indian history or Indian philosophy. For special and research libraries, the other question is whether to use a detailed general classification system like the UDC or the Library of Congress, or use a very special system like Moyes classification for law or art and architecture thesaurus for art libraries. Price of the system is also a factor, but it should not be an overriding one. In overall, choice should only be based on which there is a guarantee for the survival and maintenance of the system for a long time. We should clearly know how much detailed it is and how much current and up-to-date it is. General qualities of library classification system. The choice or selection of a classification scheme is indeed very important matter, as it will have enduring effect on the library services, and it will be difficult to replace it if a wrong decision is made. Therefore, a librarian has a moral as well as an administrative duty to choose the right system for the library. A library and classification have a lifelong relation. Obviously, judicious choice of such a tool is very obvious. A classification system should be covering the whole field of knowledge as represented in books in the library and is sufficiently subdivided to index everything that the library has. A general classification system should be evenly spread among all the areas of knowledge. Then classification should be available from a centralized national or national cataloging agency if we are to make the copy cataloging or to make cataloging and classification from some outside source. The classification system must be formulated with due regard to the needs of the books, aiming to provide a place for every type of publication. In every type of publication means that books in every subject and also books in every firm and for all sort of level of users. And of course, the classification system should be hospitable, that is, it should be capable of further extension and subdivisions as our knowledge grows. The system that we choose should be logical and in order convenient to the users in its arrangement of classes and subdivisions. And it brings together closely related classes that it should be in affiliated order. It should be clear and comprehensive in terminology used and must be accompanied where necessary by full definitions referring to the scope of the classes and equipped with notes for guidance of the classifier. That's more important. It must be equipped with the following. Number one, generalia and form classes, form and geographical divisions and other standard subdivisions or common isolates. It should have an effective and hospitable notation, which should be simple but moderately mixed. It should be laid out in a form easy to handle and consult. To assist the users to grasp the hierarchy, these days a living classification is also expected to be in electronic media, that is in a machine-readable form, which has got many additional features. And the scheme must be revised regularly, but not too frequently. It should not be some sort of an experimental scheme. It should be a stable one, but as the knowledge grows, it should be revised in small doses. And of course, it should be available easily at a moderate price. And it should have extensive indexes of the concepts and terms in the schedules and other tables. An index is a very important part of the system of classification to classify quickly and to reach some obscure numbers. The question is, from time to time, new libraries are established. Of course, which classification should be adopted or shelf arrangement? Indeed, there is no perfect scheme and there is no ideal scheme, but some have their own peculiar advantages, which should match the needs of the library. Nevertheless, the different schemes do all have distinctive characteristics which make them better suited to particular type of collection, materials and the users. The question is again largely one of suitability. Most cataloging is done now from mark records or from copy cataloging. So the fact that these nearly all contain an Library of Congress class number and a DDC number for most books in English puts considerable pressure on the librarian of a new library to adopt one or other of these schemes. Indeed, it becomes one of the consideration since both the schemes, DDC and LCC, are available for copy cataloging. But in India, it's not that easy. What are similar libraries using? For example, in the USA, Library of Congress is the choice preferred by most academic libraries, whereas in India, DDC is almost universal in choice. So, if we choose a classification system which is being used in our region or in our nation, then there can be uniformity and the users from one library to another library can use easily the collection available there. Similarly, a new public library in most English-speaking countries would probably adopt DDC, which is rather more suited to the needs of the ordinary users than the Library of Congress, which is most scholarly in nature and details. Of course, the use of classification to different libraries will be only approximate because no two libraries are likely to make identical decisions perpetually. There are also advantages in the reader finding, say in a local library, the system to which he has become accustomed or uses in his own library frequented by him. Main and its branch libraries must use the same system. Uniformity in this respect tends to disregard the character of the library or literary variant of individual collections. There is nevertheless a very strong case nowadays for as much uniformity as possible in general libraries. The administrative advantage of these are many because one can exchange the number used by them, and also it will be very useful for the readers, and of course they can also find some collective solutions to some common problems. In case of special libraries, it has also been suggested that the adoption of a uniform system of classification throughout all libraries would be quite unsuitable to the special librarian due to uniqueness of their collection. Many special libraries find themselves in the position of finding very little or their intake covered by MARC records because their collection is unique. UDC may well be preferred choice because its many auxiliaries table make it well suited to the kinds of specialized material likely to be added for depth classification. Now that the standard edition is available of the UDC and it is kept up to date more effectively, it may well be the best choice, particularly for libraries dealing with science and technology. For a very small special library, say on leather technology or pen technology or banking, the possibility arises of devising a special classification to serve the needs of the organization and its members as specifically as possible. No existing scheme provides the right emphasis in terms of citation order or even order within the facet for this kind of a library. For such minute systems, a locally made system shall be more suitable. In case of general libraries, the opportunity to select classification scheme for a large library is rare because already a scheme is in use there and it may not be easy to replace it. But the question of choosing a classification for special library arises more frequently because the collection is small and one can also choose a new system or it can be replaced by a better one. This usually happens because the collection has never been classified in a special library because local in-house classification has been used sometime as it is in the case of special libraries, or less often because collections using different schemes are being merged, as happened with the Jawaharlal Nehru University Library, which were using two systems, one for colon classification, the other for the DDC. But now they have used only one classification system, that is the Dewey Decimal classification. Here are some factors, tips in making a choice for a classification system. Choice of classification for a library is a matter of policy, of course, which whenever depends upon the following factors or conditions: the subject of the collection or specialization of the library, the level of the material, the strength of the collection, and the form of the material, and form and formats of the material too, the qualifications of the classifier, the strength of the classifier available, and sources of copy cataloging if there are for that system, and whether the classification is to be used as a tool for information retrieval or for only shelf arrangement. It is another consideration. And of course, the notation a system uses should also be one great consideration, that notation should be simple and moderately mixed. The general versus the special schemes. The classifier of a special library may find many advantages in using a classification specially designed for the subject of the library. There are special classifications for the majority of subjects, but most of them are not very well known. There may be many advantages and disadvantages as well as benefits in adopting one. There are some very well established special schemes. The National Library of Medicine scheme and the Moyes classification for law books or art and architecture thesaurus are three that immediately come to my mind. For the library that has a lot of material not covered by the big publicly available OPACs or that is not in national bibliographic services, the advantages of better structure and details can be very attractive. Certainly in major areas such as medicine or law, the greater number of user institutions can provide reassurance about the continued currency of a special classification scheme, and we can use it and adopt it in our library if that is our area. The general versus the special schemes. Points in favor of adopting a special scheme as summarized by Professor Wanda Bratton are as follows. The special scheme will offer a much more detailed vocabulary that is for in-depth analysis of the documents. The general order of subjects and arrangement of fringe disciplines, related disciplines, will be tailored to the needs of the specialist users of the library. The scheme will make provision for special form of publications which are available in abundance in a special library. It may be possible to find an online catalog for a comparable specialist collection which can be used as a source of classification data. We continue with the debate on general versus special schemes. Then, on the other hand, we should remember the arrangements for the maintenance and revision of the scheme may not be comparable with those of the general schemes because special schemes are difficult to revise, where general schemes, standard schemes which are available in the market are revised from time to time at a regular interval. And thus the scheme may not be updated as regularly as other systems. There may be no formal arrangement to support copy cataloging or to provide bibliographic services if we use a very specialized scheme. And then further, there may be very limited opportunities for training in the scheme or for other sorts of advice and support because yours is a unique system, locally made system, and some experts may not be able to do explanation or teaching of the system. That's why it has some limitations in teaching and research also. Print or electronic medium. These days, a major decision that needs to be taken by the library is the medium of the classification system. These days, popular classifications are available to the user both in print and electronic formats, and there are advantages and disadvantages attached to both. But of course, the electronic media or electronic version has many added advantages, but at the same time, it is very costly and it is available on annual basis for access only. As you know, these days classification systems or the tool for knowledge organizations are available both in print and machine readable formats, though it is necessary now to choose between the two. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. The advantages of print format are as follows. It is a general feeling that the print version of a classification system is much easier to use exceptionally for novice or new classifiers. It offers a better sense of structure of the scheme and the context of individual classes. It is easier to browse the schedule and it is easier to compare one part of the scheme with another. It is also much easier to annotate a hard copy of the scheme. That is, that you may write your local notes and record your local decisions of the library. Class numbers for new subjects can be added as they occur without waiting for editorial decisions. This can be done on the hard copy. If a scheme has lots of alternatives, those not chosen can be marked. In other words, a hard copy can be customized in a way that an electronic version cannot be. A hard copy incurs a one-time cost. Once purchased, it will be your property until the library decides to use the new edition. Even then, the old edition can be put to some use. Whereas your online edition, you have to subscribe for 1 year. After that, if you don't renew your subscription, it will no more be available to you. Print edition is usually cheaper than the online subscription. One enduring advantage of a hard copy is its stability and ever availability. In an online classification, this function is lost since the classification is constantly amended and is potentially not the same from day to the next day. Disadvantages of print format. On the minus sides of the print version, it is obviously bulkier, heavy, cannot be easily moved around, and is more prone to damage and physical deterioration. It is not updated so frequently, and this may be problematic in a rapidly changing subject. For example, the DDC edition, even regular, comes after 7 to 8 years. So a classifier has to wait for the new edition 7 to 8 years, but within that time span, much happens and many new subjects come in. Then on the other hand, locating the correct class is slower and can be frustrating at times, and it will usually need the help of a index, otherwise it may be difficult to use. One also has to consider whether publisher will continue to maintain paper copy in the digital world. Yes, it is another question, because mostly some editions, some systems, some classifications are now made available only in electronic form, and they are dispensing with their hard copies or print editions. Then advantages of web-based systems are many. So, of course, you can keep them updated, current. In the matter of currency, the online subscription has everything to commend itself. Now, online systems have become more versatile and have added many useful and imaginative features or value-added features, as mentioned by Dr. Ada Slavic, who is the editor of the Universal Decimal Classification. And she says, searching and browsing of classification notation is easy. It facilitates searching notation through associated verbal expression, that is, through headings or keywords. Sort and display of entry in many modes is possible. So you can lay out the schedule in many possible ways. And there is automatic tracing of hierarchical and associative links and relations. Further two advantages, tracing of rules to the area of that application is quick. Navigation between tables, facets, topics, and subject areas is very easy. Tracing historical data through schemes, lifespan, historical notes, or earlier numbers is possible. Various outputs, exports, and pipe attacks are generated. Identification of classes independent of notation is possible, which is used for making thesaurus and thesaurus facets. It is easy to maintain, edit, and publish as printed editions of various details. These days, print editions are one of the many byproducts of the electronic database, the system maintained by the editorial office, whereas the main system, the core system, is in the online form only. Applying the chosen system. Choosing a system is one thing, applying is another. It's the same thing, buying a car is one thing, and how to drive it is another thing. Much depends on the expertise of the classifier to make optimal use of the system with all its shortcomings. Apart from applying this tool correctly, there are many other questions to be decided as a matter of policy. And to apply it correctly, the system should be studied thoroughly. Manuals are available, books are available. Then we should also think of availing the centralized classification services, as in MARC records. Then we have to decide up to which depth the classification is to be applied, whether we are to use broad numbers or we are to use totally in-depth number to the possible extent. And of course, use of abridged edition, if available in small libraries, can be considered. When we have to adapt a system, that is to make some changes here and there for our local suitabilities, we have to be very cautious. And some adaptations are, of course, ingenious and needed. The danger is always lies in the fact that being out of step may prevent application of a sound new system or participation in centralized classification and copy cataloging services, and thus prove costly ultimately in many ways. By and large, we must incline to the view that if a system is, like DDC, widely used and acknowledged, it is best used as it stands for the arrangement of general material. Adaptations, whether authorized or locally made, should not go beyond those officially permitted by the editors. In short, adaptation is to be avoided unless the reasons for the modifications are very powerful, indeed as in Indian conditions. We have to adapt or make changes in the DDC for applying it, let us say, to Indian religion, Indian history, Indian music, and so on. The only reasonable exception to this advice is the local collection or other special material in the general library may be given local numbers. Shelf arrangement. It is useful to understand the term broken order, which indicates some disturbances of the strict classified sequence. For example, in the DDC, sometimes it is not profitable to arrange documents from 0 to 9. Sometimes order may be broken in between to bring two related subjects together. Thus, if the library uses DDC and the large classes language and literature are brought together for convenience, broken order is employed. This is obvious example. Similarly, we can also bring together, let us say, Indian philosophy and Indian religions, or we can also bring together the international law and international relations in the DDC. So these are some, you can call it the broken order. One can find many more broken order than which occurs when adaptations are made in the scheme in use. The whole object of broken order is to arrange the books more effectively and to promote their use. It should be applied cautiously, though sometimes it is, you can call it a user's interest classification also. One occasionally sees many instances, so many unjustified breaks in the classified sequence that shattered order is the phrase coined by Arthur Maltby. When we make so many breaks, it's not a broken order, it is some sort of a shattered order, and which also breaks or shatters the classification system itself. So the broken order should be moderate, not to the extreme. Not many broken orders in the same library should be, same system should be there. In addition to broken order, there are parallel sequences, or what we call them libraries within a library. In the art of library classification, the first division of books doesn't take into consideration this subject matter. Every big library is a cluster of parallel libraries, that is, libraries within a library. Parallel libraries are called sections. The first consideration is the section to which a book should go. We first determine whether the book under classification is a rare book, manuscript, thesis, textbook, reference book, CD, or some other form of material. These sections may be dictated by the utilitarian purpose, such as reference or textbooks, or the convenience of managing them, such as abnormal sized books, rare books, and so on. Of course, we cannot keep a CD of a book on the same subject with its print textbooks. Maps have to be placed in some other section. So these are the sections. Thus, in a library, there are many mini libraries within a given library. The normal and oversized sequences do not make a broken order, but rather a parallel sequence. Likewise, we see parallel arrangements in the different department of library with their various sequences. Reclassifying a library. So when a new scheme has been chosen, we have to give numbers to all the books with the new system. And perhaps an ever greater issue than that of adaptation is the possibility of reclassification, because it involves a lot of time and disruption in services. If a library is arranged according to a system which is rapidly becoming dated and no official revision is in the offing, but a better method is readily available, should we shift over? This is the question, and of course, it is not easy to answer it. A library classification, once rooted, is harder to drive out. So you have to live sometime with this system, which may be painful, which may be not effective, but it may be difficult to change it even. The answer lies somewhere between the extreme views. Library should always be prepared to change the classification system and should face the challenge of employing the best methods available, disregarding temporary inconveniences. Some people feel that we have to live with the old system, but the question is, in computer lab, we always replace the old computers which were costly with the latest versions. Similarly, for the security of the country, the old war technology is always replaced with the latest one at the great cost to the public and to the government. But we have to do this. Similarly, we should also go in for a better system if it is surely better than the previous one for good services to the users. Some feel that reclassification of an established library can never be economically justified or cannot even be contemplated by the busy librarian. Indeed, librarians rightly or wrongly dread reclassification. But as already said, we should not be afraid of reclassifying because it involves labor or it involves time, efforts and money. But we should be clear that the new system have many advantages over the old one. Know the task of reclassifying ahead. A librarian faced with the possibility of accepting a new system must carefully consider its long-term advantages with regard to the scholarly and satisfactory arrangement of material on the shelves and other advantages it will bring. In some cases, impending automation or shifting to a new building may provide the needed spur, as it happened in the case of the British Library in UK. We must also estimate the cost of change in terms of time, labor, the problem of altering many records, and the task of maintaining the service to the users while reclassification process is being carried out. The entire reclassification of a medium-sized or large library usually is uneconomical. In such an instance, the work involved in changing the scheme can be justified only if the subsequent advantages are very clear and truly great. In India, certain libraries have changed from CC to the decimal classification in recent years, and in the United States of America, several libraries had switched to LC from the DDC in the 1960s. So changing from one system to another system happens from time to time in every country. Of course, librarians everywhere face this kind of problem and are quite reluctant to embark upon such a program of reclassification. No established general scheme has yet clear-cut advantages over the well-entrenched DDC for public libraries. It is true that universally libraries in India do often prefer the adopted form of DDC. How to implement a new edition? Naturally, some reclassification is taking place continually in many libraries, as when a new edition of scheme is released, it invariably relocates a few topics. So then a library has to reclassify those numbers which are relocated. It is well worthwhile to reclassify any portion of the stock which is still in use and which has a location that seriously conflicts with the new recommended placing in the new edition. Osmosis method is a technique given by Ranganathan for reclassifying a library. Once it is decided to reclassify the library by a new system, the problem of converting thousands of classified volumes to the new scheme is the major difficulty. The answer lies in the osmosis method. It consists in adopting a fresh scheme for new occasions and regularly used older material only, while adhering to the older system for the arrangement of the material not in use or demand. It is thus without involving so much reorganization. It was suggested by S. R. Ranganathan as the osmosis method of reclassification. It has been adopted in some libraries. It results in an arrangement where there are two parallel sequences for a time representing different classification. Eventually, books no more in use will remain in old numbers. On the other hand, many librarians will be very reluctant to reclassify even this method is contemplated. They do not think it is very practical or effective. There are obvious disadvantages in employing two different schemes side by side for a number of years, and these cannot be taken lightly, as the process of reclassifying may linger for years and years. Administration of reclassification, that's how to handle the work of reclassifying. How could reclassification operation be accomplished with the least possible disruption of its services? This is a question. And answer is, one may start with the sections most in use or the sections most in need of reclassification, for instance. As for procedure, this may well depend on the library and the two systems concerned. Make a plan to be followed. Indicate how the task could be initiated. First of all, a space must be cleared to house some reclassified volumes in their new arrangement. Next, the classifiers must tackle the older system class by class, transferring material from each class in turn to the appropriate part of the new arrangement. The latter will grow slowly in space provided, and fresh space will soon become available as large gaps arise in the older sequence. Thus, all staff must be kept informed of the state of the huge task and must know which class has been removed from the old sequence for reclassification and has been put new class numbers. The library should certainly display a notice informing users of what is happening and advise them to seek help if they cannot find any item required by them in that transitional period. Reclassification is costly money-wise. The actual financial cost of the operation is very important. Regretfully, we do not have fully reliable estimate of either the cost of reclassification itself or expenditure involved for reclassifying a portion of a collection. Various other approaches include downloading of records, copy cataloging, and outsourcing of the entire job. The last option being common in the case of retrospective conversion of catalogs. You may employ some outside agency for this, changing to a new system. It is considered that classification is intellectually a more rigorous task than most cataloging, and in more libraries, the classification and indexing is carried out by senior staff. Of course, this will add to the cost of reclassifying. Coming to the cost per unit book, Ranganathan reported long back in early 1960s that it costs only $1 to reclassify 5 books. This estimate is, however, too old to be of any clue now. Gopinath in 1962 worked out in a case study cost of classification as 1 rupee per book, whereas cost of reclassifying bound volumes of periodical was to be only 35 paisa per volume only. In the same paper, Gopinath claims that by employing the method of osmosis, the cost of reclassifying any library of whatever size is found to be rupees 10,000, and the additional staff needed to use is 2 professionals and 4 semi-professionals for a period of 8 months. Copy cataloging is not as mechanical or thoughtless work. The central issue is usually whether the classification data available from external sources is acceptable to the home library, your library. As regards the choice of scheme, a library that wishes to copy records must resign itself either to the Library of Congress or the DVD decimal classification as the system of choice, because mostly in the MARC record these are available. Unless it is a specialist collection with some appropriate national collection providing bibliographic services, then we can use that special classification. The availability of records from the Library of Congress, OCLC, WordCat, and MARC records has undoubtedly caused many librarians to adopt those schemes. And for a journal collection, this may be a sensible choice with some considerable saving in terms of time and money. Other libraries will find that though the scheme may be acceptable at a general level, the particular decisions made do not match local requirements very well, and the classification part of the bibliography record has to be amended. If this is likely to happen to a large extent, then the library should consider whether there is any useful purpose to be served in adopting the classification system from outside agency, that is, copying the classification data. The service could still be used to provide cataloging data, but the classification of choice could be employed for subject access. To summarize, it may be remembered, only a few librarians will have the coveted opportunity to choose a classification system for their library. Most of us have to carry on with the system already in use, howsoever old and weak. Chance to reclassify a library is still rare. Nevertheless, if called upon to make a choice of a classification system for any reason, then a librarian is burdened with a great personal responsibility on the shoulders. Responsibility is moral and personal in the sense that a wrong decision would put the library in a perpetual trouble. Choice needs vision and experience, as on the right choice depends the quality and efficiency of library services. Indeed, classification is the foundation of library services as you know it. The obvious factor is to be considered are major subjects of a collection, its form and strength, level of users, and types of services provided by the library. Regarding the inherent qualities of a classification, it should be technically sound, complete, current in terminology, and knowledge structure. Its notation should not be too complex but expandable. Its index should be simple, comprehensive, and relative. Choose a classification which is regularly revised but not too frequently. It should be popular in the region or across the sector for the sake of uniformity and collective solutions to the common problems, and should be available from centralized services such as the Library of Congress Cataloging Services, OCLC, WordCat, and MARC Records. These days, web-based classifications have many additional features over the print versions. The other questions are of implementing the chosen system. Shelf arrangement and reclassification. Ranganathan is of the view that we should always go in for full and minute classification. Broadly classified books prove harmful to the library in the long run, and retro conversion to the full class number is cumbersome and costly. There are general and special classification systems. If the library is strictly specialized to some narrow subject area, then some standard specialized systems such as the London Education Classification or Moyes Law Classification may be used if available. In a big general library having some specialized collection, it is better to use the same classification for all the documents. Ranganathan claims his colon classification is versatile like the trunk of an elephant, which can pick up a small twig or a big log of wood with the equal ease. Many general classifications imported from abroad have to be adopted of necessity in a different culture. In the DDC, in-house extensions are made for Indian history, philosophy, literature, and other Indological subjects. Some resort to broken order of the standard sequence to bring together related subjects. Adaptations, if inevitable, should be kept to the minimum. Otherwise, library will be moving away and away from standardization and may not be able to avail of the copy cataloging services. Rarely a library may need reclassification, which is dreaded by the librarians, rightly or wrongly. Some reclassification is a routine matter as the new editions of the classification keep coming, which invariably relocate some old subjects, but the reclassification of the whole library by supposedly better system should be a very deliberated project. Ranganathan advises reclassification when the old system is no more useful and the proposed new system has clear advantages. For reclassification, Ranganathan recommends his method of osmosis.